Within the Underhives of Necromunda, far beneath the relative civility and safety of the world's many hive cities, those individuals unfortunate enough to call such places home are often forced to perform a number of unsavory or otherwise sordid acts in order to simply survive within such a hellish environment. While some Underhivers are fortunate enough to live the lives of traders, slime farmers, or even courtesans, others will be forced to turn to a life of crime in order to stay alive, becoming racketeers, thieves, or if they're capable enough in a fight, mercenaries and hired guns. Some of the more dangerous and skilled of these gunslingers will attempt to use their skills for good, albeit somewhat selfishly, becoming fully licensed bounty hunters that hunt down criminals and other such miscreants for monetary gain. Some, however, will choose to turn their talents towards more nefarious purposes, with such individuals often being recruited by one of the Underhive's many crime lords in order to act as bodyguards, enforcers, or assassins. In the case of the latter, one man in particular would go on to become arguably the single most feared and terrifying man throughout the entirety of Necromunda's Underhives, where the mere mention of his name would cause even the most battle-hardened gangers to quake in terror. This man is known as Lothar Hex. Lothar Hex is the personal enforcer of the notorious crime lord Balthazar van Zepp, a former ally turned enemy of the world's various merchant guilds. Upon being recruited by van Zepp, Lothar Hex will be frequently tasked by his employer with eliminating any and all potential rivals and threats, as well as those individuals that have failed, displeased, or simply irritated the crime lord in some way. Hex was commonly regarded as being one of the most dangerous and skilled gunfighters of the Necromundan underworld, able to single-handedly eliminate an entire room full of targets by expertly dual-wielding a pair of bolters, blowing his targets apart in a storm of blood, bone, and viscera. Once his targets had been successfully executed, Hex would often leave a signature mnemonic card beside the corpses of his victims so that anyone unlucky enough to stumble across the scene of the crime will know that such butchery was indeed his handiwork. Because of the sheer number of victims known to have died by his hands, Lothar Hex would come to be known throughout the Underhive by the chilling moniker of Widowmaker. Despite being a highly skilled marksman and a vicious hand-to-hand brawler, Lothar Hex's most distinguishing characteristic would undoubtedly be that of his face, which was said to be almost demonic in appearance. This was not to say that the Widowmaker was simply ugly or horrifically scarred in some way, for the very flesh and bones of his face would continuously shift and alter in appearance, as if they were made from molten clay, creating a truly horrific visage, as shown with the following passage from the 1st edition Necromunda rulebook.
The gang leader glared in drunken astonishment, too numb with terror to move from his chair. The sight that met his eyes was more horrific than anything he had seen in a lifetime of Underhive fighting. The assassin's face seemed to blur and shift, flesh, bones and sinew liquefied and reshaped. The human face disappeared, and the face that studied him so coldly was a mask of bestial evil.
While Hex may be best known for his horrific and constantly shifting facial features, it remains unclear as to just how exactly the Widowmaker is able to perform such a seemingly impossible feat. So what could be the reason behind Lothar Hex's terrifying appearance? The first and admittedly most likely possibility is that in order to terrify his targets, Hex makes extensive use of polymorphine. Polymorphine is a specialist drug that, when taken, allows its users to radically alter their physical appearance, effectively granting them the ability to shapeshift, making it a favoured tool for the operatives of the Kalidas Temple of the Officio Audiorum. The shape-shifting abilities granted by this drug are not solely limited to one's facial features, but are in fact capable of altering the entire body, allowing those that take polymorphine to not only impersonate individuals with differing heights, weights and builds, but also the opposite sex and, in more extreme cases, members of an entirely different species, such as an Eldari, Orc, or even a Gene Stealer. While the use of polymorphine is often synonymous with Kalidas assassins, they are far from the only beings to make use of such a drug. For example, within the novel Lord of the Night, The Dissimulus, an individual that served within the retinue of Inquisitor Caustus, was known to make use of polymorphine to such an extreme degree that they had over time become completely addicted and dependent upon the drug, even to the point where they would begin experiencing withdrawal symptoms should they go without it for extended periods of time. But if Lothar Hex is indeed utilizing polymorphine in order to continuously alter his facial features, then one has to wonder as to just how exactly the Widowmaker was able to obtain such a specialist drug, especially within the lawless depths of the Underhive. Because of Hex's close association with Balthazar Van Zepp, who to reiterate was once closely aligned with Necromunda's various merchant guilds, it's entirely possible that the crime lord could have been supplied with vast quantities of the drug prior to his falling out with the guilders, or that he could have even used his vast criminal wealth to purchase polymorphine on the black market, obtaining the drug from a number of corrupt or otherwise unscrupulous traders that make their way to Necromunda from off-world. Another possibility behind the ever-shifting face of Lothar Hex is that the Widowmaker was simply some kind of mutant. Due to the high levels of toxins and other such contaminants that are known to saturate the Underhive, in addition to the continuously recycled food, air, and water consumed by Underhivers, this will over time cause toxins to build up within the biosystem, resulting in genetic degradation and, eventually, mutation. Since mutation is so commonplace throughout the Underhive, mutants themselves are often tolerated by other Underhivers and even Imperial authorities to a certain extent, providing that their deformities are considered to be relatively minor, such as extra fingers or webbed feet, or that such individuals at least attempt to conceal their various disfigurements. While minor examples of mutation are indeed commonplace throughout the Underhive, some individuals are known to sport more extreme deformities, such as tentacles, an armored carapace, or even multiple heads. As such, it's entirely possible that Lothar Hex could have been born with a mutation, such as something akin to a mutable DNA structure, which granted him the ability to effortlessly alter his facial features at will, perhaps even learning to harness such talents from a young age in order to intimidate others, allowing him to survive within the Underhive. Alternatively, if Lothar Hex was indeed a mutant, then perhaps instead of him sporting some sort of unique physical deformity, the Widowmaker is instead being known to the citizens of Necromunda as weird. Upon Necromunda, the term weird is often used to describe beings that are capable of manifesting psychic powers, such as telekinesis, pyromancy, or even the ability to commune with animals, such as giant rats and miliosaurs. With this in mind, if Lothar Hex is indeed a psyker, then he could very well be a natural telepath. Telepathy is the term given to the psychic discipline that focuses upon contacting, manipulating, and even controlling the minds of others, allowing telepaths to either take possession of another's movements, read their thoughts, or induce confusion and paranoia into their victims, even forcing them to relive their own darkest memories. In the case of the latter, it's entirely possible that Lothar Hex could be utilizing his innate telepathic abilities in order to alter the minds of others, so that instead of seeing his true appearance, they are subjected to a type of psychically induced hallucination which depicts the Widowmaker with a monstrous visage. This idea is loosely supported within the first edition Necromunda rulebook, for within a short story that details one of Hex's various killing sprees, the Widowmaker states the following to his target before delivering the killing blow.
I am the darkness. I am the darkness inside you all.
The fact that the Widowmaker referred to himself as the darkness inside could be alluding to the possibility that Hex utilized his telepathic abilities to psychically induce a series of hallucinations within his targets, which in turn forced them to view the assassin as something truly terrifying and monstrous as opposed to a mere man, should Lothar Hex truly be some sort of psyker. But there is a darker possibility. Instead of utilizing polymorphine or being some sort of mutant, could Lothar Hex instead be possessed by a demonic entity? Instances of demonic possession upon Necromunda, while relatively rare, are not completely unheard of, as there have been examples of weirds being possessed by warp-spawned entities during the midst of brutal gang fights, which would then proceed to go on a destructive rampage before being killed. Indeed, as mentioned earlier, Lothar Hex even claims that he is in fact something darker than he appears to be, which could be potentially be alluding to the fact that he now serves as a demon host. It's well known that the act of demonic possession, or more specifically the act of bonding the essence of a demon to a mortal body, does grant the host access to a number of powerful abilities. In addition to granting their host enhanced strength and speed, a bonded demon can also bestow a number of mutations, such as bat-like wings, rending claws, scorpion-like tails, as well as a plethora of other such gifts. While some possessed will have their bodies permanently altered by their new demonic symbiote, transforming their appearance into something far more bestial, the majority of such individuals will often appear relatively unchanged, shape-shifting only under moments of extreme stress or when charging into the heat of battle, before reverting back to their original form once the situation has calmed. While demons are more likely to form a parasitic bond with Chaos Space Marines than a typical baseline human, due to Astartes often being regarded by demons as both powerful and worthy hosts, there have been a number of documented instances where regular humans have also managed to accomplish such a feat. One such example, as detailed within the Black Crusade core rulebook, is shown with Axenia, the thrice possessed. Axenia was the youngest child of a noble family upon the world of Laudomada, who was known to be an incredibly resourceful and cunning individual, who had grown completely resentful of her own family due to her siblings being favoured and fawned over by her parents. Over time, however, Axenia would begin her swift yet steady rise to power, systematically removing her rivals one by one before amassing a vast court of sages in order to uncover the mysteries of the universe. It would eventually be revealed that one of these aforementioned sages was, in actuality, a follower of the Chaos Gods, who would then persuade the noble woman that she could obtain godlike power by subjecting herself to demonic possession. Little did Axenia realize that the sage had intended to corrupt and kill the noble woman, offering up both her body and soul as a sacrifice to Slaanesh, the god of hedonism, excess, pain, and pride. Despite becoming possessed by a Keeper of Secrets, an incredibly powerful type of greater demon, Axenia would subdue and enslave the demon through her sheer self-obsessive force of will, leeching off of the demon's essence before banishing it back into the depths of warp space. Over time, Axenia would undergo this process again and again, feeding upon the power of those demons attempting to possess her while maintaining an iron grip over her very will and sense of self. Upon attempting the ritual a fourth time, Slaanesh, having become highly entertained with Axenia's prideful actions, would reward the noble woman with the gift of apotheosis, transforming her into a demon prince. Upon Necromunda itself, there exist individuals who are also rumoured to have formed bonds with demonic entities, developing a number of traits that can no longer be considered human. The most notable of which, as detailed within Necromunda, the Book of Ruin, is that of a being known as the Eightfold Harvest Lord. The various descriptions given for the Harvest Lord, from those eyewitnesses fortunate enough to have escaped his wrath, not only detail how he moves with a strange, stuttering gait, much like a video file missing several key frames, but that behind his mask is a demonic-looking grin that is said to be unnaturally wide. It is even said that while the Harvest Lord was rumoured to have once been an all-too-human butcher or common murderer, he is now something other. The fact that the Harvest Lord is said to sport an incomprehensibly wide, demonic-looking grin is certainly evocative of the disturbing, unnaturally shifting face of Lothar Hex, further supporting the idea that the Widowmaker had indeed managed to form a bond with a demonic entity. The idea that Lothar Hex is possessed by a demon could also explain as to why the Widowmaker was able to effortlessly and accurately wield a bolter in each hand, for bolters scaled for the average baseline human, as detailed within the 2nd edition Dark Heresy core rulebook, weigh about 7 kilograms or just under 15.5 pounds each, making them heavier than hellguns and even flamers. If Lothar Hex was having his strength augmented by a demonic entity inhabiting his body, then this would indeed allow him to dual-wield bolters with the ease one might with a pair of pistols, although it is entirely possible that the Widowmaker could have had some sort of cybernetic or biological enhancements within his limbs, or utilized a series of special supports, braces and gloves, such as recoil gloves, which allow him to utilize such bulky weapons with little effort. But if Lothar Hex is indeed possessed by a demon, or at the very least becomes suspected of forming a parasitic bond with such an abomination, then he would undoubtedly become a prime target for the Cult of Redemption, who will stop at nothing until the Widowmaker is hunted down and burnt to naught but ash. Or perhaps the truth is something else entirely. Perhaps the ever-shifting face of Lothar Hex is not the result of some strange mutation, or even caused by demonic possession, but is instead, for lack of a better term, manufactured. It's entirely possible that the Widowmaker's appearance is caused by some sort of mask or helmet, such as those utilized by Eldari Harlequins, which are capable of changing their very features on a whim, often to reflect their victims' worst fears back at them, or to become a twisted, unsettling reflection of their own face. However, if Lothar Hex does make use of a Harlequin's mask, or perhaps a human equivalent from the Dark Age of technology, then one has to ask as to just how the assassin was able to obtain such a rare and valuable artifact. Whatever the truth may be, the only man who knows for certain is Lothar Hex himself. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.